Hi folks, welcome to today's color process video. As you may notice, I'm lacking a bit of hair up here. Also, it's a weirdly beautiful day when it shouldn't be. I like the fact that I can sit around in my t-shirt, but I shouldn't be able to sit around in my t-shirt at this time of year. That's not right. But anyways, today's comic. Okay, one thing, actually, before I even talk about today's comic, one thing I want to mention is the reason I didn't put up a video um, for the previous comic was because I did do a process video, except I did it on my iPad Pro. I don't know if you saw it in the typed up process post, but I got myself an iPad Pro last week, or at least the week before I'm recording this, and I decided I should do a bit of a test run with it and actually color one of my comics on the device just to see if that would be feasible. And I learned very quickly that it absolutely is feasible. It's a beautiful little machine to work on. Um, the only downside is that I don't have access to the same recording software on it that I do on my MacBook. Well, when I say that, no, that's not true. I do have access to recording software on it, but because the resolution of the iPad Pro's screen is so high, it leads to gigantic file sizes with the videos. I spent just under an hour coloring the comic as I was talking away about it, and uh, the file size ended up being just under 1 gig, and that is just not feasible to do that. So I'm going to I'm going to try and figure out a better system for recording on the iPad for a potential future for a future video. Like maybe have it that I'm sat at my iPad and I have, you can't see it here, but I have like a clasp that I can put my phone into. So maybe what I'll do is I'll I'll actually just record my process that way, which again is a bit more awkward, but look, I'll figure something out because I would like to move more of my work um, onto the iPad rather than doing it on this laptop, because the first thing I noticed straight away when excuse me when I was working on it was that um, despite there being some teething problems because I'm using a program I wouldn't be used to using, everything else just, it was so fluid and everything was so quick, and that really impressed the hell out of me, to be honest. And I would, as I said, I would like to bring more of my workload onto that rather than having to sit at this desk working on this laptop, because this laptop, it's quite the workhorse. I mean, it's been going for just under a decade now, but it is showing its age and it is very slow at times. And having a device that would allow me to get things done just that bit quicker would really help me out. So yeah, that's something I need to think about. In fact, I'm now that I have you, I'll just say this, that I may even think about changing up the $10 tier. Um, like not do videos, do something else, because I'll be honest with you, the videos, as handy as they are, they're also the most time consuming, one of the most time consuming parts of my process. You know, especially when it comes to doing stuff for Patreon, and I would like to would like to speed up my process if I could, and um, still being tied down to this machine and having to do videos the way I do them currently, um, it does slow me down, and it like ties me down to one spot. So look, it's something I'm just thinking about. It's not a definite thing just yet, but of course, if I do change up anything, you will be the first to know. So, anyways, all that aside, let's talk about today's comic. So, again, we have badly drawn dolphin, but not exactly badly drawn. Um, I mean, with this comic, I have those kind of like cliff faces, like those rocky kind of like land masses in the first panel, and they didn't even need to be there. They don't even really play a part in the overall narrative, but since my last few weeks of badly drawn dolphin comics have basically been, I've been using them as an excuse to practice doing things I wouldn't usually do. I decided, feck it, I just throw those like that landscape into the first panel, just to break things up a bit. It's nice to have this gag strip, but then there's like just this nice art there, and it's it's good for the reader and it's good for me because for the reader it helps break things up. It gives them something nice to look at, and for me, it's good practice, and it's nice to be able to just do something a bit different, because if you look back at the older badly drawn dolphin comics, it's all just dolphin on a blue background basically, and there's only so much of that you can do as an artist before it just gets boring. So yeah, this is very much my attempt to curb that kind of boredom. So as for the colors with today's comic, it's not quite as vibrant as a lot of the most recent badly drawn dolphin comics. I had intended on making the ocean look a bit more vibrant and going for a color that wouldn't be quite so just plain old blue and green. Like I wanted to, as with some of my previous comics, go for a bit of a different color to the water. But the more I worked on it, the more the blue just kind of worked. Where I went with a very desaturated kind of dark blue, because it just helped with the contrast. Because the one awkward thing with these comics is that it can be difficult to get dolphin to contrast against the backgrounds, especially on water, which is for the most part that's what he's on in the comics, and that can lead to some awkwardness with regards like getting a nice like contrast between dolphin and whatever background element they're on. So with this one, I decided to go a lot darker with the color tone for the ocean. However, to make the ocean look a little less flat, because like I originally started with just a flat color, I added a gradient, and then on top of that gradient, I just started using a spatter brush tool just to I'd color like I'd pick a color from one part of the scene and I just like splash some color onto it, and that would just make it look less digital. It just gave it a lot more texture and made it look almost kind of like hand painted. Um, then on top of that, I added an overlay on top of the ocean layer, and I think, what colors did I go for? I went with like a vibrant red, which like oh my god, words, which did a gradient into like a vibrant blue, and I then using Command U, which brings up the hue saturation tool. I just slid the notch on the slider on the hue dialog back a bit, and what that ended up doing was it ended up giving the ocean this excuse me, this slightly more aquamarine blue green kind of look to it, and it just added a, it's quite subtle, but it just added an extra sense of depth and shape to the ocean. Whereas before, it looked fine before, but it looked a little flat. So I find overlays can be very good for that, for just adding just a touch more shape and volume to something. It's almost like a cheat code at this point. I mean, that's why the eagle-eyed amongst you will know that each of my comics, I always have like an overlay put on top of all the art, which tends to be I tend to go for a purple overlay, because whatever it is about that, it just makes the colors and the line work and everything just, I can't explain it, but it just makes it pop that bit more. And it's not even that big a change, but like if you looked at the difference between the art with the overlay on and the art with it off, the difference is subtle, but it's still noticeable. Um, and I've pretty much stuck with that ever since. So like every now and then, like as well as those like overlays that I put on top of like the main art, I'll also every now and then I'll add overlays to various elements of the different panels. Um, Another thing I want to point out here is the coloring on Dolphin in the last panel, like where I have him mostly draped in shadow, but then if you look at the kind of the bloody kind of rim of his body and head, um, that isn't affected by light at all. In that there's no shading effects going on there, and I've probably mentioned this before, but anytime I put like blood or anything like that into my comics, I like for it not to be affected by lighting at all, so that it really pops and stands out from the scene, and it makes it just that bit more intense and noticeable as a result. I, I mean, originally that wasn't even going to be blood. I was just going to have it so that Dolphin's main body would just be more like a toy opening up. But I, me being me, I decided to go for shock value, so I put that blood in there. So yeah, I think I've prattled on long enough, so I will leave it at that. Thank you very much for watching, and I will talk to you at the next video. Take care.